In 2020, something didn't add up. When fear replaced common sense and critical thinking, and protocols stopped matching what we were seeing, a lot of us started asking questions. And once you start digging, once you start researching, you can't unsee it. Welcome to Nurses Out Loud. I'm Jodi O'Malley, ER nurse and nursing ethics educator. And this is where we talk truth, patient rights, and real-world healthcare so you can make informed decisions and advocate with confidence. If you've been looking for your people, here we are. If this resonates, if you find yourself nodding along, please like, follow, and share this show with at least one person who needs it. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate. This episode of Nurses Out Loud is sponsored by West Cocoa Pharmacy in Cocoa, Florida. If you've been looking for a pharmacy that thinks outside the one-size-fits-all box, West Cocoa Pharmacy partners with licensed prescribers to create individualized prescription-only compounded medications. That includes ivermectin, benbendazole, fenbendazole, and other repurposed drugs, alike low-dose naltrexone, methylene blue, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, custom erectile dysfunction combinations for men, and carefully selected supplements. They also support integrative oncology care, offering compounded medications that some physicians use in alternative cancer protocols. One of my favorite parts is their free consult with Nurse Donna. She's there to provide education on evolving repurposed therapies and HRT, so you can ask better questions and have a more informed conversation with your own clinician. As always, this is not medical advice. I'm not telling you what to take. I'm pointing you to resources. Any medication or protocol should be decided between you and a licensed provider who knows your history. To learn more, visit Cocoa Pharmacy, COCOA Pharmacy.com. That's Cocoa Pharmacy, COCOA Pharmacy.com, and let them know you heard about them on Nurses Out Loud. The food pyramid isn't a poster, it's a purchasing order. What does that mean? Well, today I have with me Nurse Tori Jensen, who is also a registered dietitian. If that name sounds familiar to you or her face looks familiar to you, it probably should, because Nurse Tori was a courageous nurse who actually filmed her firing and getting walked out by security at Kaiser Permanente back when the mandate to get COVID injected was in full force. They had denied her sincerely held religious belief. They outsourced that to companies. I don't know if you guys know that whole backstory, but Nurse Tori has been speaking up, and she's also a regular contributor on Nurses Out Loud. And so today we are going to explain the change, why it matters, and the trickle down effect as fast as we can. So hold on, stay tuned. This podcast is actually worth continuing nursing education credits, and you will find those details in the show notes. So welcome, Tori. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell our listeners a little bit about your background, because I didn't even know this. We were just talking off air about it.
Everyone knows me as Nurse Tori, but my former career was a registered dietitian, and I worked in the clinical setting. So you see those little dietitians walking around with their lab coats on and asking people what they like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and also educating about blood pressure and diabetes and doing tube feedings and TPN recommendations. So that was what I did. That was my former life. I was the clinical nutrition supervisor in the hospital. And then I just said, I want to work less and have better schedule. So I went back to nursing school. That was pretty much my story, but my bread and butter is nutrition. So I was a registered dietitian, did that all through college and then shortly after. So I've never lost that. I've brought that with me into my nursing career.
Yeah, I love that. When you told me that before we started, triggered. I forgot that I was one of the, I forgot exactly what the title was, but because I had a year of nutrition under my belt, I was a CNA at the time. I couldn't get into the hospital as a CNA. So I got in through the food service. So you would have actually have been my boss
Yes.
and given me the list of patients that I needed to go see that missed a meal and give them education.
Yes. And in the hospital, just like in the military and the schools, there's regulations, and we use the government recommendations on how much protein someone should have, how much carbohydrates, how much fiber, and we have to reverse engineer the meal plans for those. And so all of the recipes have to be, the analysis has to be done. We have to portion things out specifically. So this is really where the new food guide pyramid recommendations will come into play. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the hospital and in these other institutions.
Really will be. So, guys, just recently, HHS and the USDA released the new dietary guidelines, and they brought back a simplified pyramid message and to eat real food, which is, oh my goodness, people are up in arms about this. But so, Tori, in plain English, what does this new message prioritize, and what does it really move away from?
Well, visually, if you look at the original food guide pyramid that we all knew from school, it has the carbohydrates and whole grains at the base. So the majority of our food should be from that. And then the protein and the fruits and vegetables were not as emphasized. And that's the biggest difference, is it's flipped. So now what we see emphasized is protein, healthy fats, and fruits and vegetables. So real food just all got moved to the top and prioritized. And then processed food is less prioritized. And that's wonderful, because you're going to get more of the things that your body actually knows what to do with, and less of the preservatives and the chemicals and the weird stuff that gets added to food that our body frankly doesn't know what to do with. So when I left the hospital, I started a business, and my program was called the Real Food Reset, because when you swap out processed food and prioritize real food, it solves like 90% of the problems. Not kidding, like straight off the bat, because your body is finally not dealing with this high sugar diet most of the time. That's a lot of what gets removed, and it's replaced with protein, fats, carbohydrates, and fiber that your body actually absolutely needs. And so it's the vitamins and minerals there that are in abundance. And that's why real food should be the priority. And that's the biggest change. And it's fantastic. I'm so glad that they didn't bend to the pressure to make compromises with saying, oh yeah, processed food's okay. And, because people have difficulty paying for it. No, it's like, okay, make the recommendations correct, and then we will figure out how we are going to roll this out to the Americans and make this realistic for people to actually implement.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a domino effect. Like when the federal dollars buy food, policy becomes the menu. Yeah, if you can just go with, just give me some examples of what that actually means.
Because the federal government is making the recommendations, these institutions that are funded by them have to follow suit. And so that's going to be the schools, the hospitals, the federal organizations that make that, the SNAP program, the WIC program, that actually make recommendations to people. They are going to have to change their recommendations based on this. So it is a trickle down effect. It will take time, because this is going to be different than a lot of the things we see. So for example, when you are a nurse at the bedside and you would have a patient who was diabetic, their blood sugars are out of control, they're on insulin, and they're in there maybe for a diabetic foot ulcer. And then their tray comes and you see it's half of it's carbohydrates, and your intuition's like, well, this doesn't look right. But that's what the recommendations are. And so we had to give them a certain amount of carbohydrates per meal. That's how we work it, based on their weight. But that's not taking into account the fact that they are diabetic, insulin resistant, and so they need less carbohydrates. So anyways, it'll be interesting to see if now the trays that are coming are lower in carbohydrates.
Ever felt torn between your conscience and your job? You're not alone. It's time for nurses to rise, to lead with integrity, grit, and faith. Earn CEUs that teach you how to stand firm in truth and advocate without fear at righteousrn.com. That's righteousrn.com. Protect your license, your integrity, and your peace.
Hydrate, higher in fiber, higher in protein, and healthy fats.
It absolutely will be interesting to see because, like you said, it does have this effect. And doing research for the show, I was looking at like the school menus, the vendor contracts. Earlier, you were talking to me like there's like Cisco or all these different vendors that come in with these canned foods, that's processed food, basically. We feed our military, our veterans with that, like the Head Start programs, childcare programs, the VA facilities, prisons. And then we get into like the supply chain with the distributors and the food service vendors. And I think this one is the most amazing. And it's local producers and farmers, right? Local farmers. It will demand the shift over a period of time, with like kind of like a farm to table type option where we can source local farmers ingredients to make these foods. You think that'll happen? Like, how long do you think that would happen?
I don't know. I've been pretty impressed with the things they've been able to do in a year.
Mhm.
So I don't understand necessarily what kind of pressure they'll have to put on back there in order to incentivize these companies to buy local. Because right now, with like a Cisco Foods or something, no one can compete with that. Their prices are so low that hospitals, which I know best, so I'm using them as an example, hospitals will always go with the big. It's like buying at Costco, right? Like you're going to get a cheaper price and these local farmers can't afford to sell at that price. So they
Mhm.
don't, there's no incentive there for the hospitals or these institutions to buy locally. So if they can fix that problem,
Yeah.
then that I think will really drive change.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many farmers that have gone out of business because
Yeah.
of all of these regulations and stuff that they put on them. And it looks like Secretary Kennedy and the HHS is really changing that. Guys, if you just go to hhs.gov, you can go to their press releases, and you'll see all the things that he's done. Just recently, he was in Pennsylvania, yeah, talking to the local farmers there. So talk about a little bit about how we got here in the first place. I remember the 80s with the fat-free
Oh, yeah.
era, my parents getting those fat-free snack wells. And what do you think that did, Tori?
Something that I actually learned in school. And the reason I emphasize that is because there were so many things that I did not learn as a nutrition student. But this was, I guess they would say conspiracy theory, but it was very mainstream, well known that in the 80s, we vilified fat and replaced it with sugar for flavor because fat is flavor. I mean, think butter. Oh my gosh, think about the flavor of butter. When you put butter on a steak, it just makes it taste so
Oh,
good. So fat is flavor. So when you take fat out of food, especially processed food, it doesn't taste very good.
mhm.
And so they replaced it with sugar. And then we see the incidence of metabolic disease go skyrocket over the next 10, 20 years. And then we're also seeing all these autoimmune diseases skyrocket too, and inflammation. Now, I'm sure that vaccines had a fair amount to do with that, attacking your immune system.
Yeah.
But if you think it's like the perfect storm, if your sugar consumption is so high, then you're predisposed, your its immune system is not as strong. So
Mhm.
we're just dealing with all kinds of compounding issues here. So when they removed fat, they replaced it with sugar and ruined our metabolism.
Yes, I agree with you. I remember when I was on a diet after I had my first kid, because I never had to be on a diet before. Guys, go to the grocery store and take sour cream, for example, and look at the back and see how much fat and how much sugar is in that, or how much sugar is in it. And then look at the fat free version of sour cream. It's higher in sugar. And so, we did have what was it? So the food pyramid, I believe, was in the 90s, and then and then they did away with that and made My Plate, so it was visual.
Those are the main two. Yeah. So the food guide pyramid, and you got to think, and I'm so happy that they did this. The food guide pyramid doesn't help the average person to put that into practice. And I would say, even now, inverse, food guide pyramid also does not help people that into practice. It's like, okay, great. I know I'm supposed to be eating less processed food, more real food. I think the average person knows that,
Mhm.
but they're not doing it because they don't have a format for doing this. They don't know what to buy at the grocery store. They don't have recipes to go with it. And so these are great recommendations, but there does need to be follow through with education
Mhm.
similar to my plate so that people can easily put this into practice. So I'm hoping that that is what they're working on in the back end, because to get rid of my plate and just leave it that way is a total miss, in my opinion.
Yes, I can see that because people are more visual. When we did have that food pyramid, it was like, okay, you need 6 to 11 servings of
What's a
grains every
serving?
day. Huh?
What's a serving? What's an
Right.
ounce?
Mhm.
How much well, what about, okay, that's for my mom, but what about for me? I'm a kid, or vice versa. You really need education in the schools from the time that the kids are in kindergarten all the way through high school in order to reinforce this stuff. And it needs to be simple and things they can actually do at home, tools they can use, like their hand to measure a serving. There needs to be tons of education about blood sugar control, which is my bread and butter.
Mhm.
Blood sugar is the reason, insulin resistance and blood sugar control issues is the reason for our metabolic problems in this country.
Mhm.
So when you flip the food guide pyramid and you have protein and healthy fats and fiber at the top, well, now if you actually do that, just your blood sugar is going to get more controlled just right there from that one single change. But what happens when you go to a party or you eat and you want to eat a cupcake? Like, that education that I teach my kids, because that's my wheelhouse,
Mhm.
is how do you include these foods that are not recommended on the food guide pyramid and still have a healthy diet and still balance your blood sugar? That is the challenge, because we see right now PCOS for girls in this country is like skyrocketing.
Mhm.
And that's basically diabetes of the ovaries. I mean, that's like oversimplifying it. But I see these young athletes that my daughters play with, and they are guzzling really high sugar drinks,
Mhm.
and they've got acne and they've got their periods are horrible. I'm just see the writing on the wall that years from now they're going to get a PCOS diagnosis,
Mhm.
which I have, because no one taught them how to balance their blood sugar, that's just all that means is like how to fuel your body in a way that is going to not abuse your body.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one other thing that I'd like to add to that is really parents, it's what you bring into the house. If you're cooking and this is what you're giving your children, and you're cooking whole food and natural food, they're gonna develop taste buds for it. Really, we do have a lot more control than we think. And I think, speaking to your point, Tori, about the sugar levels. I mean, it doesn't take very long for you to like try to or for you to balance out your sugar when you're eating real food. If
Yes.
you're, and that's another thing on this food pyramid, that they don't recommend any added sugar. 0.
Zero,
Mhm.
zero. That's because it's that detrimental to your health. Now,
Yeah.
that's not very realistic. Even honey would be considered added sugar. So it's natural, but
Yeah.
it's considered, because it's a simple sugar and you add it to things. So those are like those little nuances. But honey is absolutely a part of a healthy diet. And so is a little bit of added sugar if it's included with other things and in small amounts. So that's the education you need to give your kids. I'm so passionate about this because it's more simple than you think. I had my last client said to me, I feel like I need a PhD in nutrition just to eat these days. And I was like, yeah, because no one has explained it to you in
Uh-huh.
simple terms how your body works. And the way that your body works, I'm just going to do like a quick little nutrition
Yes. I was just
class right
gonna
now.
You're low on energy and running on empty no matter how healthy you try to be. We know how it feels to struggle with low energy and exhaustion. That's why Green 85 exists, a concentrated organic superfood blend with zero toxic stuff. Not only will this product solve your problem, it's quick and delicious. You shouldn't have to stimulate yourself and feel exhausted all the time, and after you buy Green 85, you won't. Get yours now at chemicalfreebody.com/NOL.
ask you. And maybe, incorporate in this segment your grocery shopping. Do you have like any grocery cart rules or anything like that?
Sure. Yeah. So just a quick nutrition overview. This is how your body works. And this is how I would explain it to a kid. Okay. So your body's preferred source of energy is carbohydrates or sugar. Now that's anywhere from fruits and vegetables all the way down to a soda, right? So your body is going to use that energy um, immediately. It's the first thing that your body wants to use. And that also sugar is what your brain uses most efficiently. So when you have sugar cravings, it's your body being really smart. Your body's super smart. It's saying, oh my gosh, you need fuel. Go eat some sugar. But then we go grab cookies and our body uses that really quick. And now we're hungry again. This is how we get on the blood sugar roller coaster. So if the majority of your intake is from processed sugar, or even, just not high fiber carbohydrates. So any like crackers and you're grabbing even a little piece of just snacky stuff here and there, you're going to continue on this blood sugar roller coaster. So the way that we get off the roller coaster and we balance your blood sugar and fuel your body appropriately is we prioritize protein. So every meal you build your plate around protein, healthy fats, and high fiber carbohydrates. So that's where you're going to get your fuel from. So you replace, for example, a juice box with, like for a kid, with an apple. So if you want, that's a high fiber, you're getting your carbohydrates, but so now you're going to feed the good bacteria in your gut, but you're also not going to have this blood sugar spike from just eating more of a simple sugar. So we build our plate around protein and produce. That's how I oversimplify it in my head for my clients. And if you look at the food guide pyramid, they've done that. So what's at the top there? What's to be emphasized? It's protein and produce. And that is like the most simple thing. If you just stop right there and you go to eat, you're like, okay, I'm hungry. Tori says I got to grab a piece of something that's got protein in it and some produce in it. And so right there, you're already going to help yourself out and give you somewhat of a format. So when you go to the grocery store to eat more real food, which is their recommendation, stay on the perimeter of the grocery store. And you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, where's the fruits and vegetables? They're on the outside. Where's the protein that's not highly processed and, who knows what else has been added to it? It's on the outside. Where is all the packaged food that has all the sugar added to it and all of the additives that make us addicted to these foods? They're on the inside. So if you can stay to the perimeter and you think about it, when you plan your meals around real food, and then you are automatically going to edge out a lot of the processed food. It just will happen.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. I remember learning that years ago. Stick to the outside. If you stick to the outside and just don't go in those aisles, resist it, except for spices, right? Spices are great. They don't you can spice everything up. Actually, since coming back from Israel, I'll tell you, there was another little tip that my son, he was on The Biggest Loser back in season 16, and he gave me this advice. He said, keep it simple.
Yeah.
He's like, just eat what you like and measure it out and then just eat it until you're kind of sick of it in a way. And so coming back from Israel and all their amazing food, I've been just spicing up my chicken, and then I create a salad with peppers and onions and spices and tomatoes, cucumbers, and I leave that in the fridge. And when I'm hungry, I go for that first. And then what happens? I'm full. I don't really want anything else. And then I'm reaching for strawberries since they're low in sugar. So thank you for that advice, Tori. What's your thoughts about medical schools? AJ just came out and said that medical schools must, can you believe it? Well, I'm sure you know that it hasn't been a core training or core subject in medical training. I mean, nurses, like you said, we've had to take it to get our bachelor's degree.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I would say nurses probably need more too. And the physicians, it's a good idea. I'm glad they're mandating it and making more of an emphasis on it. But at the end of the day, if they don't change their practice, they're still just going to be the ones that are writing prescriptions because they don't have the time to educate the patients. Healthcare is still not set up that way. So I'm glad that they're emphasizing that so that the doctors can emphasize lifestyle changes with the patients. But, and you know, it will give them more confidence too. It will give the physicians more confidence when they're talking to their patients. But we know how it is. The doctors, we all have our little role to play, and nurses are the educators. And so as a nurse, what I would be doing right now is educating myself more on nutrition so I feel more confident giving that type of education. Specifically, if you are a nurse working in the bedside or in an outpatient setting, what you can really brush up on is simple ways to help people control their blood sugar. So, because that is the root cause of all of our problems, the inflammation, the obesity, the diabetes, cancer. So if you can help people with simple ways to do that, that's going to be very, very helpful. And, really just simple ways to do that is including protein at every meal. That's like the easiest way you can say to someone, because even if they eat a donut, if you have a couple eggs before you eat a donut, you're still going to be way better off. Now, this goes very contrary to the whole calories debate, right? So I often tell clients, like, don't look at calories as much as you are looking at the macronutrients in your food. And of course, to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. That's not going to change. However, will be able to stay in a calorie deficit and not be hungry all the time if you include protein at every meal, because you're not going to be on this blood sugar roller coaster. You include protein, healthy fats, reduce your amount of sugar that you're taking in at each meal. You will not believe how your cravings will go down. Yeah. Protein at every meal, and even something as simple as eating your protein before you eat carbohydrates. So eating your protein and fat, it's just the way your body processes the food. So if your blood sugar is low, if you have a patient in the hospital and their blood sugar is low, what do you give them right away? If they can talk, and you give them sugar. Right? You give them a juice box. You don't give them a complex carbohydrate. You give them a juice box, bring their blood sugar right back up. But what does the policy say after that? You're supposed to give them a sandwich.
Yes.
Why? Because their blood sugar will go up and come right back down. We have to give them some complex carbohydrates and protein to make it stick. Same goes for you. Same goes for someone who's not diabetic. If you eat your protein and your fat first, it slows down the absorption of your carbohydrates, preventing these spikes. So that one thing alone, so protein at every meal and eat it before your carbohydrates, that can really make a difference.
Yeah, big difference. I know one of the little tricks or one of the little tips that I give my diabetic patients on discharge is what I did with my dad. Gosh, almost 20 years ago. He was saying he was the youngest of 8, and I told him, I said, Dad, you can control your own blood sugar. You don't need to be on medications. And he goes, oh, damn it, Jodi. Yes, I do. You think you know everything. All my family is diabetic, blah, blah, blah. And he came out and stayed with me in Arizona. And I said, okay, let's try this. Let's have no carbs with your breakfast. And then an hour later, let's check your blood sugar. And then he did that. And then I said, okay, now have your carbs at breakfast and let's check your blood sugar an hour later. And he saw that number stayed up. And I said, okay, how about this? Now I want you to walk around the block or go to the mailbox, depending on, for him, he could do it. But I said, just walk, around the block and come back and check your blood sugar. And he did. And it would go down. You know what? That man, Tori, was walking like 5 to 10 miles every day, because what happened was it was a contest for him. It was like, oh, can I get it to go down a little bit lower? And he was dropping weight like crazy. And I said, now, Dad, you cannot be taking your blood pressure medication or your diabetes medication. And this is even before I became a nurse. I said, because you're going to tank your blood sugars.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, well, let me call the doctor. And the doctor said, yeah, Mr. Alston, you don't need to be on your metformin if you're controlling your blood sugar. And he got off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's like what you just said is a great tip, because when you walk right after you eat, or even before, I recommend after though, because it prevents your insulin, which is your body's storage hormone. It prevents it from spiking. So when your blood sugar spikes, your insulin spikes. And ultimately, over time, this is what causes insulin resistance and leads to diabetes. So if you keep your insulin from spiking by using some of that energy right away, using some of that fuel that you just ate right away, then it will keep it down. And which is fantastic. So this is how you can reverse, like if you've got type 2 diabetes and you're trying to get off medications, you're trying to lower your A1C, walking after meals, and even sunlight is really
Mm.
helps. So the hormones, don't wear your sunglasses, get the natural light in your eyes. That helps control blood sugar as well. Really great research coming out on all that.
Love it. Love it. All right. What do you tell the people, Tori, that say, I don't have the money to buy whole food? I'm on a budget. What do you say to them? Do you have any like staples or quick meals or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say if you can buy bulk, that actually saves you some money. And then just simple, like if you're buying all the snacks and packaged food, that actually adds up, right? And you're going to be more hungry and you're going to end up eating more over time. So it's definitely a change in your mindset to think, okay, I am used to buying all this packaged food and now I'm going to plan ahead and shop the sales, shop the discounts. My husband is so good at this. His
Mm,
mom taught him. He will go to the meat aisle and he's finding the sales and then he'll buy multiple of whatever is on sale. So it does take some planning though. And this is where I feel like the USDA has some work to do, their work cut out for them to really help give people some resources for simple meals for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and how to build your plate with that protein, healthy fat, fiber, give them examples for that. Having a plan before you go to the grocery store is so helpful. So you can say, like, you could
mm,
save so much money by not wasting food too. So if you say to yourself, I'm going to have a yogurt bowl every morning for breakfast, which is high protein, and I'm going to add some nuts to it and I'm going to add some fruit and that's it. If you don't buy 5 different options for breakfast, you're going to save money because of that. And then if you just plan your lunches and you could even make bulk for dinner and have those left as leftovers, well, now you're
mhm.
killing two birds. You're not having to come up with a lunch option and it's balanced just like your dinner was. So you just make bulk protein, make extra vegetables, and that's your breakfast. Or I'm sorry, that's your dinner and your lunch for the next few days. And it saves you time. So those would be my recommendations.
Awesome. Are you still working with people?
I'm taking very few clients just kind of on a selective basis right now.
Okay. How do they find you?
You can contact me at the Tori Jensen on Instagram is the best way.
Okay, the Tori Jensen on Instagram. Yeah, because we know, we're talking to nurses here and we understand, that a lot of nurses and even with our rewards, if we did a good job as a unit, it's pizza, everybody's bringing in all of these
Sure. Yeah.
unhealthy foods, but they don't realize too that it is cheaper to make your own protein. Just make a bulk of it and then change up your sides
Yeah.
and bring it to work. And okay, so here's some nurses' call to action. You can ask your facility what they serve and why. Teach the label literacy to your patients. Try to do that like once per shift. Show them a product label on something and teach them about that and fiber and stuff and what that means to the body. And let's stop using non compliant as a lazy diagnosis, nurses, because they're documenting that patients are non compliant. I think when people know better, they do better. Do you find that as well, Tori? Is that, if people have some education?
Yeah. Non-compliance is usually an education gap. And you could say, oh, well, I've had those patients, I've taught them over and over again, but we don't live with them. So they don't have that applied knowledge, right? So you can know something, someone can tell you something, but that's the big gap is like, how do we actually put that into practice when we're home and we go to the grocery store and we feel overwhelmed and don't even know where to start? And that is not just for the quote unquote non-compliant person, that's for all the nurses listening to this probably that don't feel confident making a meal plan and shopping for their family and for all of our patients. So we have a lot in common actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, what I would encourage everyone to do is to reach out to your school and ask your school what they are preparing to feed the kids for this fall. Because I don't know how long this will take to implement, but you can certainly ask for the menu and ingredients and what vendors they use, and let them know that that something's changed. And you expect them to fall in line with it and feed your kids healthy options. So, all right. Well, thank you, Nurse Tori.
Thanks so much for having me. I love your show.
Thank you so much. Until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless. Thank you for listening to Nurses Out Loud. Nurses are called by our code of ethics to keep learning, do the research, and lead with moral courage and integrity, especially as healthcare changes. Keep doing the next right thing, especially when it's hard. If this show resonated with you, please like, share, and follow. It boosts us up in the algorithm so more people can find us. Until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for the learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate.